A genre of question that pops up a lot in D&D spaces is getting the players to care. How do I make my players care about the gods? How can I get my players more immersed in my world? How can I get everyone to roleplay more? The emotional need present behind those questions is, I feel like I'm working very hard to make this world a real, believable place, and everyone is at best ignoring it, and at worst, rejecting or mocking it outright. Hello, I'm Skele the ADHDM, and I think we can look behind that emotional need and ask a more specific and more helpful question. How can I incentivize my players to learn more about the game world and to consider what they learn when they make their decisions? In case you're in a hurry, the short answers are use the information your players have already given you about their characters and about their taste, and don't be afraid of leaning into tropes that your players and their characters already understand. There are very few game rules that reward player engagement in anything except combat, at least in D&D. So it is up to we dungeon masters to incentivize the behavior we would like to see in the game. And it would be a little dysfunctional and Pavlovian if we just started handing out experience points like dog biscuits when the players make us subjectively happy. Instead, we want to make a world that feels real, and we want other people at the table to treat it like a real place. We want them to think of their characters as real people. And I want to take a moment here to clarify. When I say we're making something real, I mean it in a way that is distinct from making something realistic. Usually realism in a system like D&D means adding more resources to track and adding penalties and rewards for how the players manage them. And while that can be a whole lot of fun in the right context, it's not what I mean here. We are not going to increase verisimilitude today by making the party stop for in-game bathroom breaks or catch colds. So let's start by asking what our game would look like if the players did treat the game world like a real place. Would they seek to earn the favor of the gods in your world? Would they follow in the footsteps of legendary heroes? Would they recognize that certain names or omens mean they are in grave danger? Would their hearts race when they learned that the sword that they just picked up was forged by a legendary smith or enchanted by a famous mage because they recognized the markings along the blade? Would they use their knowledge of your world's history and culture to hunt for fabled treasure, avoid danger, navigate political hierarchies, and seek out well-known allies? So when we look at how we incentivize that kind of thing in a healthy and meaningful way, we also must ask ourselves, what does this same exact problem look like from the perspective of a player? What would it look like if the game world felt like a place my character could really live and has lived up till this point? Would NPCs recognize my lineage and treat me accordingly? Would there be a sect of the Chivalric Order or Arcane Academy from my backstory in this major city? Would I have any sway because of that, or any enemies? Would my sworn foe actually show up and become a common enemy of the whole party? Would the class features, the spells, and proficiencies that I chose when creating my character be useful more often? My personal favorite consideration: would my character based on my favorite book, show, or movie get a narrative arc or magic item inspired by the source material? Going through the information the players have already given us is a perfect way to make our game world a place that they will love to inhabit. If you're DMing for a paladin wearing his late father's armor and he's on a quest for vengeance against the man who had his father framed, imprisoned, and eventually killed, that killer should belong to an organization somewhere in your world. And whatever you want that player to know, and more importantly to care about in your world, can be tied to that organization. And it doesn't need to be found in pages of handwritten backstory. If one of your players is a zero backstory, full-on goofball running a gnomish artificer named Pistachio, you can start to spread word of their craftsmanship. Now they get a commission from an important NPC to honor a religious holiday or a folk hero. If they accept, they are participating in the culture of the world. Now the player is either asking you questions about the game world to incorporate into their masterwork, or they are wanting to add in their own lore with their own ideas, and both of those things are going to make the game better. Your players' backgrounds, backstories, inspirations, hyperfixations, and playstyles are not distracting them from participating in your world. They are force multipliers waiting to be combined with your ideas anywhere that they overlap, even a little bit. What's already familiar to them, because they made their own characters, I assume, is a very powerful way to familiarize them with the rest of the world. That leads us to our second resource. Summed up in the words of Dale Kingsmill,
I think there is value and there is power in shorthand.
Consider the Master Sword. Looking only at the logo for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, without any added music, text, or cutscenes, seeing the broken Master Sword, I am flooded with a complex array of memories and feelings. Drawing the Master Sword in a Zelda game is always awesome to me, in the literal meaning of the word awesome. And it is exactly the kind of narrative moment that I long to give to my players. You have to prove yourself in the first act of the game, and all along the way, you learn of the sword's power, that it's the world's only hope against evil. When you finally pull it from the pedestal, and the enemies that threatened you before are now trivial, you feel like that guy, the one who will go toe-to-toe with evil incarnate and seek out even more challenging and deadly foes and turn the tides. The Master Sword is a shorthand for the safety and salvation of Hyrule. It's propped up on decades of games, the same moment presented over and over, and the story of the sword itself changing a little bit with each appearance. But even that is propped up on what is perhaps the oldest and most evocative coming-of-age imagery. The boy who would be king drawing the sword from the stone. Now it's broken. Our journey from childhood to adulthood, gaining competence and understanding of the world and its hardships, has been shattered, literally, by tragedy and the passage of time. Nobody has to monologue that at us. We don't have to read it in a book. The story is intrinsic to a single image, because that image is 100% reliant on what might be the most tired trope in fantasy: a sacred weapon to be wielded by a chosen hero. If that trope hasn't expired and stopped us from feeling our feelings about it, then no trope has. I don't care how many books someone has read, or how jaded they are by recurring fantasy tropes. If they themselves came across a serene wooded glade and saw a sword embedded in a stone pedestal or even a log, they would either try to pull the sword free or regret not trying forever. It's just too powerful. The same is true of my favorite series, Castlevania. While Zelda has reskinned a public domain artifact, Castlevania has unabashedly used a public domain cast of monsters, calling them by name, because we already know who they are and what they do. I'm hard-pressed to name a character who has been adapted from their source material more times than Dracula. Even Strahd von Zarovich relies on our cultural understanding of the myth of the vampire. Nobody has to tell you what kills a vampire, or the bad stuff they can do to you. We know that when we're writing, vampires can be killed by whatever we want. That's the power of writing. We can say they're weak to heavy metal music or rhyming couplets. But the myth of the vampire is so powerful because it gives us a seemingly invulnerable foe that is better than us in every single way, and also it gives us the secret to their destruction. Subverting expectations can be fun, but we don't have to throw out the garlic baby with the holy bathwater. The melodrama of a destined battle between an anime guy and a villain from a horror novel in 1897 is still the root of every single game. As new games get made, they trade cultural influences with similar contemporary works, like the novels of Anne Rice or JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And the reinterpretation of the shorthand gets even more powerful and stays recognizable. This can go hand in hand with using our players as a resource. If you have a player, like me, who can't go 45 seconds without thinking about Castlevania, you are one vampire castle or magic whip away from getting me invested in whatever you want.
Hey man, you want to go to our private compound and serve the great mission?
Absolutely not. That sounds like a cult.
What if I told you the great mission was training to slay vampires?
Cool, where are we going? If you know that your players watch a lot of shonen anime, you can bring in a tournament arc, a rising underdog, a fierce rival. You can give a player a named technique that scales with their level like a cantrip. Any way that we package a familiar trope the player will understand the narrative investment and payoff on some level. In games like D&D, when we see a rickety rope bridge, we know that it's gonna get cut down or there will be a collapsed board. When we see a thick fog, we know that there is danger hidden within. When we see the full moon on a cloudless night, we know that soon a howl will split the night air. When we hear a legend, we know that that legend is true and that we will witness it firsthand. If you've already used tools like this in your game, or you have an idea for how you'd like to, please share it in the comments. I'd love to know about it and probably to use it. These comment sections always end up being public treasure troves of Dungeons & Dragons knowledge. Thank you to my Antediluvian Lurker and Dungeon Delver tier patrons, Adam M, IronTrash, Troy, Borkware, Courtney Monster, M, Mitch B, Raspilicious, Sam, Shawn S, and Shawn M, and a special thank you to my newest Dungeon Buddy patron, Skele, and thank you for watching.